what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy this.
Zack Nagy, publisher of LSU Tigers on SI. Zach, how are you this morning?
Doing good this morning. How about yourself, man?
Doing well. Thank you so much for hopping on. Because, look, we got a lot to talk about in terms of LSU. Obviously, spring practice coming up, beginning at the end of this week. The big question everybody wants to know, look, Bo Davis moving on from LSU to the New Orleans Saints. Where do you think LSU needs to go for D-line, Coach?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think ultimately you're going to have to find somebody who's an elite-level recruiter. Filling the shoes of Bo Davis is not one that's going to be easy. There was a reason he was the highest paid defensive line coach in the country, and you got to find an elite-level recruiter, a player who can continue to develop relationships and more. And there was some buzz that Gerald Chapman from Florida, the Florida Gators was somebody who's going to be a potential target for them, but he decided to stay put in Gainesville with Billy Napier and company. So scratch him off the list. There's a couple different options you can go with here. Eric Henderson was one that a lot of people were talking about too. Ultimately, I'm not quite sure that's going to be one that fills the void either. So a lot of options here. Really intriguing to see how Brian Kelly and company kind of go out and fill this void.
As far as not necessarily who you're going to hire, just the loss of Bo Davis, what kind of impact do you think that makes for LSU, not just in the spring, but going forward all the way through 2025?
It's significant, man. I think Bo Davis obviously is one of the most respected coaches in the country for good reason. And like I was saying, elite-level recruiter doesn't quite do it justice. He's a guy who has continued to develop relationships with his players, coaching staffs, etc. And he's respected. He's earned that from everybody. And in the recruiting aspect, Taylor, is where I'm just going to have to continue to go on and on about. He is an elite-level recruiter and proved that time and time again. So just going out and trying to find some more bodies is going to be key, especially with him departing.
Not only that, Zach, and you're totally right, like his ability to recruit is elite, but I know you've been out there at fall practice. I've been out there at fall practice. Like anybody that's been out there has seen him. He's one of the best, if not the best coaches on the staff, like period, in terms of like getting these guys ready to play. I thought that the D-line played a little bit over its head this year, and in my opinion, all that was in large part to Bo Davis.
Yeah, and when you're out there, it's just pure intensity, right? Like he's in his guys' faces. He's not scared to say anything. He's just a fun guy to watch, and that's how you get the most out of your players day in and day out. And when you say they kind of played above, let's say, the talent level that they had on the roster, it's spot on. Obviously, he didn't have the group that he would have liked maybe from the jump. He inherited a challenging situation, right? But to go out and get the most out of his players day in and day out, I think it's a testament to the coaching ability that he has in going out and, like I was saying, get the most out of his players every single time. Seeing guys like Gio Paez succeed. Obviously, you lose Jacoby and Guillory, which was a shame. But you go out and have Ahmad Bro play above maybe what he was ranked coming out of high school, switching positions to the interior defensive line. It was fun to watch. I mean, Gio Paez was fantastic. Ahmad Bro was fantastic. You slide Paris Shand inside, he looked fantastic. So it was fun to watch Bo Davis kind of work with the pieces that he had, get the most out of each and every one of them. Big shoes to fill, but you got to trust Brian Kelly to go out and make a big-time hire here, and I'm excited to see what he does with it.
Do you think LSU is – because, I mean, look, you got the spring portal window coming up. Do you think they're in danger of losing any of these D linemen over this Bo Davis departure?
I think it's a great question. I think that's kind of the million-dollar question, if you would say. You got some players on the roster that he recruited, obviously. It starts with guys like Ahmad Bro, Dominic McKinley, etc. For me, I'm shifting focus to that 2026 recruiting class. That's where I'm really looking at Richard Anderson. You got the number one player in the state of Louisiana committed to the program, the number 2 overall defensive lineman in the country committed to the program. So for me, I'm shifting focus to that 2026 class and trying to make sure that you can lock down and keep Richard Anderson out of New Orleans, goes to Edna Carr. You want to keep him committed to the program. And then really when it comes to guys on roster, you want to keep players like Dominic McKinley, Ahmad Bro. You got Zion Williams committed as well. You want to keep those guys happy. So definitely got to keep them in the loop with this hire because you want to retain the players that you got on the roster. The long term, you also want to make sure Richard Anderson's happy too because that's kind of your crown jewel as it stands.
Zach, as far as a little preview of spring football, what do you think, maybe going into spring, top position battles you're watching heading into the summer?
It's a great question, and I think you can look at the quarterback position being settled. Running backs got some buzz, some juice. On the offensive side of the ball, I'm sitting there looking at the offensive line. You got guys that are coming in like Josh Thompson, Braylon Moore, your two transfers, that are certainly going to make an impact on day one. But that right tackle spot is where there's going to be some buzz and some juice. You're going to be watching that position battle closely. Weston Davis appears to be a guy right now that could have the edge, but I wouldn't be surprised to see others step in the mix as well. You could see Carius Kern potentially slip out there potentially. He's a big guy, so he's more of a guard. He plays an interior offensive line position, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him try to push for some offensive line reps as well. And then flipping to the other side of the ball, the defensive backfield, man, there's so many players to work with. At the cornerback slot, you have DJ Pickett, of course, who's fantastic. You got Jakeem Jackson. He's fantastic. You got Mansour Delane at the cornerback position, too. So you got a lot of players right there. For me, I'm looking at those two spots, the cornerback room and the offensive line. And right when those gates open, you know how it is at spring camp, right when the gates open, I'm running over to that cornerback room to check out what they have because I think that's the most revamped position in the entire team.
Yeah, 100%. Like you mentioned, Jakeem Jackson, Mansour Delane. You're bringing in DJ Pickett, who was just Mr. Everything coming out of high school. Zach, as far as the transfers, you mentioned a few of them there in the DB room, but just transfers as a whole, obviously Brian Kelly crushed it in the transfer portal class. Which one of those guys are you keeping an eye on in spring practice?
Yeah, it's Mansour Delane, man. I think he is so talented. He's a Swiss Army knife, jack of all trades, whichever you want to call it. I think he's so fun to watch, and I think you pair Corey Raymond and Jake Olson in the defensive backfield as coaches, really working with him and putting him under their wing. I think Mansour Delane has the chance to explode this season. I'm very excited to watch what he can do. And then DeMarcus Cooley, I think that's kind of a casual take. LSU went out and secured him from North Carolina State. He was sensational in 2024. To get him in Baton Rouge is key. So I think it's a nice 1-2 punch of transfers. Obviously excited to see Mansour and DeMarcus, but there's buzz surrounding DJ Pickett for good reason. I wouldn't be surprised to see him start week 1 at Clemson, man. He is so sensational. 6'4", 180, long, lengthy. He can do it all. So to watch those three, that's when, like I said, when those gates open, running over there and checking out and see those guys because I think they have so much talent in that room and that entire defensive backfield as a whole. Super excited to see what they're working with.
I know you talked about like O-line battles, cornerback battles, as far as like position battles, but like heading into spring, if I asked you biggest question mark for this team as far of a position, maybe like not a ton of depth, not a ton of returners, like what position would that be for you?
It'd be the safety room.
Yeah.
And I can kind of say that off the bat immediately just because, and I know it's a little contradictory because I just said I like DeMarcus Cooley in that safety room. But other than that, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. You flip Javian Toviano to that room. And he's a player that's going to be sitting there for the 2025 season continuing to adapt. But that should be where his bread and butter's at. That's where he was recruited to play. Sensational player back there. So DeMarcus Cooley and Javian Toviano, those are the two guys that I have high expectations for. You return Jordan Gilbert. You return Deshaun Spears, who's a player that I've been high on since day one. Right there at Denham Springs. It's a fantastic player out of Louisiana. So excited to see what that room has. But it's a little thin. I would have liked to have seen them go out and get another safety in the portal as well. But nonetheless, you got DeMarcus Cooley, Javian Toviano, Jordan Gilbert, Deshaun Spears, etc. You got some guys in that room, but I'm excited to see where that talent gap is. Excited to see what rotations Jake Olson elects to work with right off the bat during spring camp. So I think there's a position battle there brewing, some players that are capable, and we'll see maybe if they go out and get another safety during the spring portal window as well, if they're not necessarily satisfied with the competition level in that room.
I guess that's kind of like the big thing. Like, okay, it's hard to poke holes in LSU's transfer portal class, right? I mean, they did such a good job. That was maybe my one concern was, yeah, you brought in DeMarcus Cooley. To your point, he was a great player at his previous stop, but that's the only guy you brought in, and you lose a Sage Ryan. And look, I get it. LSU fans had whatever opinion of Sage Ryan they wanted to. He's still a guy that had been in this program a number of years, started a lot of games. Like, you basically return Jordan Gilbert, that's it. And then you bring in DeMarcus Cooley. I mean, you just mentioned Javian Toviano. I love Deshaun Spears. I mean, he's a guy that's 6'3", 210. I mean, who do you think is going to get the first crack at it? Because I think DeMarcus Cooley, they brought him in to start, no question about it. On the other side of him, who do you think is going to get the first crack at that spot?
Yeah, another beautiful question. I think when it comes down to it, Javian Toviano could be the player that they go to early. Obviously, he was taking those first-team reps during bowl prep, got some big-time snaps during the Texas Bowl. So I think that's a player that they have high expectations for. I love Deshaun Spears, so I don't want to go out and kind of write him off when it comes to early in camp, because I think they're high on him too for good reason. But like you said, Marcus Cooley, I'm penciling him in. They went out, they secured him from the portal over a bunch of potential suitors like Ole Miss, et cetera. So put Marcus Cooley in there on day one. Excited to see how he works. And then next to him, I'm going to put Javian Toviano in there for now. Obviously, Jordan Gilbert has the upper hand from an experience perspective, but I think Javian Toviano could be a guy that could kind of turn some heads sooner rather than later. Really excited to see what he can do there.
Zach, at least on paper, Zack Nagy joining us right now, publisher of LSU Tigers on SIs. On paper, this looks like one of Brian Kelly's most talented teams heading into the season, if not the most talented. How much pressure do you think is on BK heading into this year?
Yeah, I think the kind of expectations are rising, obviously, with the number one transfer portal class. And with expectations comes kind of that heat, right? Everybody has, like I said, the expectations get higher and higher. You got the number one transfer portal class in the country with a bunch of headliners: Patrick Payton, Jack Piver, Mansour Delane, Marcus Cooley. You went out and got another quarterback in Michael Van Buren. I mean, you are sitting there in good position from a roster reconstruction perspective, but that also means that expectations are going to rise. You have no more mulligans, is how I'd like to put it. First 3 years were a little shaky last year. 9-4 just isn't going to cut it if you include that Texas Bowl victory. So it's Baton Rouge, right? It's LSU. It's a championship or bust season, it seems like, every time in Death Valley. So you always want to go out and exceed expectations. We saw him kind of do that in year one, and since then regress a little bit. So now it's hot now. Now you got to go out and have a big-time season, and I'm excited. I think Brian Kelly has pieced together a sensational staff. You go out and you fill that defensive line coach spot, and you're going to be in a good spot. I think Brian Kelly's done an excellent job when it comes to piecing together a staff and then also getting his roster in check for the season. There's a nice blend between returning pieces and fresh faces. Getting Garrett Nussmeier back was obviously step one. Getting Harold Perkins back, too. With Weeks getting back up to speed is key for this team, too. So I think from a roster construction perspective, they've done a really good job to be competitive in 2025. A coaching staff where you bring back a Corey Raymond, Jake Olson as well, Blake Baker. The defensive side looks good. So I'm excited to see what they can do. But expectations are rising in Baton Rouge for good reason, and I think that's great for this team.
Zack Nagy. Zach, thank you so much for hopping on with me this morning.
I appreciate it, man. You have a good one.
Yep, you too. That was Zack Nagy right there, publisher of LSU Tigers on SI.
Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.